Right, so let's go. Right, so as you said, my name is Antoni. I am in charge of the GovTech, which stands for Government Technology Program, in the Prime Minister's Office of Poland. The coronavirus response has been divided between several departments. I think Poland is quite unique in its approach, where we try to the main driver of the coronavirus response was not solely in the Ministry of Health, also the relevant health authority, but it was much more spread out throughout the relevant government departments, with us being responsible for the all information policy and the digital policy, so the digital response, which of course then allowed us to alleviate some of the burden that the health service was getting, to make sure that do not have to concern themselves with things that they're not specialized in, for example, development of apps. So this is how the app was born. The name has evolved, so from just Protego Safe to Stopcovid Protego Safe. The name, you may recall the popular children's novel Harry Potter. So this was the spell which protected people from evil magic. So I'm assuming this was the name, but the reason I'm saying that I'm assuming this is the name is because this initiative was unique in its approach to government. So I will talk a bit less about the features of the app itself. I think a lot has been said about the peculiarities of the functioning of those apps by other colleagues. What I'd like to focus more on is the process which led towards development and the lessons we could learn from this on the national and regional level, as well as the European level. So a little bit of origin. Obviously the one reason we did that, we built this tool, was to make sure this will be the first pandemic which we fight in a different way, so to say. So up until today, all the things you have listed on the slide here, as well as the ones we just didn't include here, were basically fought in the same manner. You had doctors who cured people, you had officials which introduced vaccination campaigns, etc., etc. But basically, this was a sort of a sole issue. And this pandemic is much different because I think the whole society was involved in a way. Journalists were involved, programmers were involved, startups were involved, we were involved in the PM's office. So in principle, we tried to, this is the first occurrence where really the pandemic is much less of a medical issue, but is much more of a social issue, especially if you include all those economic consequences and social consequences, etc. And what we did was, and one of the manifestations of this is the app, is this app, because we were actually one of the first countries which launched the app itself, which was very early in March of this year, which brought its own pros and cons, because we were also sort of on the very front line of being bashed by community leaders and opinion leaders on the functionality of this particular implementation of the technology. So as you probably know, the way this technology developed was there was first the very well-known Singaporean model, which was pretty much the only solution available then. So we jumped immediately towards the one thing that was available. Then Google and Apple announced that they're working on their own solution, which of course meant that we had to redesign our whole architecture just to make sure that we're all up to date with the newest technology. So we were sort of building bridges simultaneously to driving on those bridges, basically. This was the process which I think obviously gave a lot of benefit to the patients and the people endangered by the disease. But on the other hand, this also meant that we were also the first ones to feel the burden of scrutiny, because there was no authority we could relate to. But the most important thing here is that the app was not a government. It is not a government product. I mean, now it is. But the way it originated was there was a group of programmers who approached the Minister of Digital Affairs and us through one of our hackathons, and they were able to create a solution which they assumed would be useful for the government in combating the epidemic. And what we decided to do was to take up this project and make sure that we're capable of scaling it up, securing it, conducting audits, privacy checkups, etc., etc. But it still remains sort of this community-driven open source project, which was under the direct patronage of the ministry and of the Prime Minister's office, but it wasn't sort of it wasn't strictly controlled, so to say, by the organization. Obviously, with time, this control was more and more imposed due to the fact that with time, sort of the requirements became much more strict in terms of privacy protection, in terms of security, etc., etc. But sort of it originated as a community project, and we really appreciate all those people who approached us with this idea. Obviously, it changed a lot, but sort of the roots are there. Yes. So just very briefly, what's the point of doing this? As I said, we found that we have the technology available. We have the people who are capable of making it. We believed that there was a large potential for people to benefit from this. Therefore, we thought that it's not just we could do it. It was an actual duty for us to make sure that we use this technology for the benefit of the people. And that's what we did. 5 main pillars of the application. I won't talk precisely about how we implemented this. I will talk more about the process which surrounded this implementation. First of all, privacy. As it has been said several times during this conversation, we're under very strict control of our DPAs and of the Data Protection Board, the European Data Protection Board. So we originally strived and aimed for the solution which does not use personal data at all, and we did achieve this. At least our DPA, the Data Protection Authority, agreed. But then sort of the interpretation of the European authorities was that we should all synchronize towards one interpretation. So we sort of had to drift towards that with our application as well. But in general, we tried to make sure that there is sort of no. It's not just that we process the data securely. We wanted to make sure we do not collect it at all. This was sort of the intention. It was also actually a requirement from the community itself that they do not want to sort of delve too deeply into protection issues. They wanted to make sure that there is just no data at all which is being processed. So again, we try to make sure that that's the case. Why I say dignity, I don't mean sort of the traditional human rights approach. I mean, we're most focused on making sure that the app is not viewed as something that the government imposes on people, or that's sort of the one-size-fits-all solution. We believe that we think of it as a sort of a diary, which makes sure that we are able to record meetings with people that we haven't met. But we wanted to make sure that the human was always centered to making every decision within the app. So whether to share the keys, whether to download the app in the first place, and which areas or which countries they wish to be interoperable with as soon as the interoperability emerges. Security, nothing really out of the ordinary here. Obviously, numerous audits, independent auditors, domestic, international. We wanted just to make sure that there's not just security itself, but there's also trust. So, I mean, we didn't want to be viewed as those who audit themselves, so we had to involve external parties. Effectiveness obviously is what we try to aim for with very strict coordination with community, but also much broader community of people who deal with digital privacy, etc. Again, we try to maximally avoid locking this within a government entity, and try to involve a much wider community itself, which is obviously a challenge, seeing as we wanted not to distract the Ministry of Health and other health authorities from their day-to-day duties of fighting the epidemic. So we had to try to make sure that the experts which we involved were not the ones who are desperately needed elsewhere. And finally, consensuality. It has been said several times here. The app is voluntary; it will remain voluntary, and all the decisions which can be made how to use the app are also made by the individual themselves. So this generally concludes my sort of initial phase of my remarks. And just to summarize, the point here was that, and just to summarize the point. So yeah, you do not see my screen now, right? If someone else sees it, should see it.
We see your screen, but it was on the presentation mode.
Okay.
So we are still on slide number 6.
Antoni, okay, so, yeah, so that's actually fine.
You have to make a full screen in the presentation mode, and then...
No, I mean, I'm done with the slides themselves. I just want to conclude with sort of external remarks. Just to summarize what has been said, I think the main sort of lessons learned here. First of all, whenever we implement technology which is cutting edge and new, we are certain to face external scrutiny of a very large caliber, and we have to abide and get accustomed to the fact that pioneers basically can make mistakes, and they have to be able to be as flexible as possible and be able to adjust as quickly as possible to the technical requirements as well as the societal requirements of what the app should be and how it should be used. Second lesson we've learned is that it cannot be the central government itself which does sort of all the work when we're fighting the pandemic. We try to make sure that basically all those regional areas which deal with the pandemic themselves, there are about 500 of them, about 400 of them, are well informed as to how useful the app is in their local circumstances. We're trying to expand this to include more functionalities, but for now, what we're doing is to just mostly spreading awareness about the usage of the app itself. And thirdly, and I think finally, the largest lesson we've learned, and I believe this was the first government project that was done in this way, be it software or hardware tools. So I think the first government tool was built in the fashion which allowed for the government itself not being the sole driver of the innovation. So, as I said, there was a community of startups and SMEs which approached us with the solution. We gave them the power they needed to construct the app, secure it, and distribute it among people. But in principle, we tried to be the ones who facilitate the process, rather than the ones who pretend to be the ones who know best about how to develop software. So, I mean, obviously, we did grant assistance there, but the whole project is open source. We tried to listen to community feedback. We involved external impartial experts. The audits were done by a third party. So we tried to do away with this burden of this being a government-imposed solution. There are historical reasons why the developer population is generally opposed to anything the government imposes, but in principle, it's usually more effective when a project is done in a way that involves the community in a much broader sense than the obvious choices, which is the medical staff. And finally, this is a great lesson. I think this project was a great lesson to us, regardless of the pandemic itself, how to conduct projects which sort of go outside of the walls of the government buildings themselves. I fully recommend this approach. I think it was probably the reason why we managed to be among the first ones to launch the app and implemented the changes as they went. But obviously, if there are any questions, I would be more than happy to answer.
Thanks a lot, Antoni, for your lessons learned. Do you have a view of the regional uptake within Poland?
No. So this is one of the elements we try to ensure that which says that I mean, we do have the information about the regions where people reported, so we try to sort of see where the general uptake is, but we made sure that the app itself does not speak in any way, so to say, to external servers. It does not dislodge any sort of information about the people located. So the only piece of data we have is the number of downloads themselves. Again, this is to protect privacy. We just do not want to know your address or even the place you live in. Just because, just one thing to build upon this. There are many communities in Poland which do not number in the thousands, which are villages of 30, 40 people. And we really believe that if there was public knowledge or any knowledge really about the fact that someone did download the app and they ended up positive, we just wanted to make sure that there is no way of identifying the person and then giving away to the panic around this person being positive or not.
Thanks a lot, Antoni. So now